and welcome to the 17th lecture of Hammurabi Tablet Forum. Hammurabi Tablet Forum reached to this level is just because of your support, and we are expecting this support in future also. Our today's lecture is admissibility of electronic evidence. As you all know, we already adopted electronic evidence as a medium of a communication, and that gives a huge that creates huge electronic records. And there the exact question arises whether how to protect and how to preserve and how to present that electronic records in court of law. Before start with the program, I would like to introduce our today's guest. His name is Advocate Vicky Shah. He is a practicing advocate, he is author, and he is a speaker. Currently he is working as a legal advisor of IRCTC. He is a controller, certificate authorities, Government of India, and he is also a trainer of a police officer. Till date, he trains 10,000 plus police officer in a 19 plus state. And I would love to share with you all that recently he was felicitated by our Commissioner of Police, Mumbai, Sri Dattatreya Padsalgikar, for his immense contribution regarding training of police officer in a cyber crime investigation and cyber law. I will not waste your time more, and we will welcome our guest, Advocate Vicky Shah, and our founder, Advocate Rahul Maskar. I would request Advocate Rahul Maskar to give flower bouquet to our today's guest. I would request Rahul sir to start with this program.
Today we have on admissibility of electronic evidence and we have called Mr. Vicky Shah, who is basically expert into this kind of a thing. So without wasting more of a time, I would request Mr. Shah to enlighten us as regard what is evidence, how WhatsApp or SMS or emails we can tender in courts so that it become an admissible evidence. Please. You sit.
Okay. I thought I'll speak informally, but thank you, Mr. Maskar, for inviting me. Most of the cases people have a misnotion that this 65B is only for the matters of IT Act, which is not the case. It is applicable in all the legal domains, all your civil suits, criminal suits, wherever there is an electronic record to be produced as evidence, you require to comply it with 65B. 65B is not a mystery. It is a very clear-cut guidelines about how evidence can be presented in the court of law. Say for example, I send a document, a PDF attachment to you. You receive that email. Now whether that document will be considered as an electronic evidence or electronic record. I am rephrasing my question again or repeating it again. I send one attachment to you through my email ID. You receive that email with that attachment. That attachment is an electronic record or electronic evidence? Record. Only when it is admissible by the court it becomes evidence. Till that point of time it is electronic record. IT Act clearly defines what is electronic record. Anything which is text, information which is in text form, video, multimedia, either stored, received, transmitted or processed. So there are 4 key ingredients in this. Information has to be stored, transmitted, preserved or processed. Now what do we mean by this? Most of us are having Aadhaar card without any option. We don't have any option, but we should have one because of lot of services which are wanting Aadhaar to be linked. Your Aadhaar is also now used as a temporary digital signature. If you know, Government of India had launched in 2015 a service is called e-sign. So what is e-sign? Until now, what is the practice we have been doing is whatever agreements are to be signed between the parties, we take a stamp paper, we print the agreement and then we sign physically, get it notarized or get it registered if it is to be registered. IT Act allows you to have a e-contract. Now e-contract is different than what you have your terms and conditions of websites, privacy policy and mobile apps, because those are one way. You don't have any opportunity to revise it, or you don't have any say on it. What does IT Act say under section 10A? You can have contracts in electronic form provided both the parties affixes their digital signature. Now unfortunately we do not have a central system of stamp duty in India. Every state has a different stamp duty for each of the requirements. Standard business agreements are on 100 rupee stamp paper. Notary, if it is an indemnity in Maharashtra, it is on 500 rupees. In Delhi, it is on 200 rupees. It depends on state to state. Now, what if I am in Bombay, my client is in Delhi, and we need to enter into an agreement? How much stamp duty will be required to be paid so that the document becomes legal? And what if I want to execute this through online without going to Delhi, neither he visiting to Mumbai? So section 10A talks about it. I will have to pay the stamp duty whichever is the highest among the states, because as per the Maharashtra Bombay Stamp Act, if there is a deficit in stamp duty, you have to pay the difference, or whichever state has the highest duty, you pay that and both the state comply to that. We can also have, say for example, agreement, stamp paper is purchased in Mumbai, executed through email, but jurisdiction can be Delhi and vice versa. There is no bar that you cannot have jurisdiction because the stamp paper is procured in Mumbai, it has to be Mumbai jurisdiction. Generally, when we get clients or we get agreements, lot of people misunderstand or misinterpret that because the stamp duty is of particular state, the jurisdiction of that state only prevails. The important thing in an agreement is this document is made by between the parties, so and so date, effective from so and so date, executed at, if it is through email or through place. There is a separate clause governing law in which you specify the jurisdiction and that will prevail. It is not necessary just because the stamp duty is of a particular state, the agreement will be tried there. It is a very clear rule. Now coming back to IT, what we do is, suppose this party, I am signing that agreement, Mr. Maskar is in Delhi, and I am the first party to sign the document, he is the second party. So the PDF file which is there with my agreement, I have to have a stamp duty paid. Now this stamp duty in India, in Maharashtra, we do not have a opportunity to pay the stamp duty online. Only if it is a registrable document, then they insist of getting a stamp from the GRAS system, otherwise you cannot. So even if I pay 500 rupees on GRAS and I use that, it is invalid because it clearly says this document is only for registered purpose, otherwise not. It should be the other way around. If I have to register a document, then the physical stamp paper should be okay because it is anyways going to get digitized. But if my system, which is not supposed to be registered, if it is offline, then again the dispute of stamp duty. You know, if you have, most of you must have procured stamp duty stamp paper in your so far career. Unless you insist, the person on the counter does not give you the receipt. Only if you insist they will give you, otherwise they will not give you. Mandatorily they should have been giving it to everybody, but because of paucity of time or the way it is being handled, they are not giving, only they give it to people who ask for it. In the franking thing, you have to enter in the registration of it. Now if you pay online stamp duty for say GRAS, you have a serial number which is auto generated from the system, which is unquestionable. You can always trace back whether this document was paid or not with the bank verification and the challan number. So it is more safe to have an online stamp paper compared to a physical stamp paper. It may be duplicate, it may not be appropriate, it may be printed half, it may be half blank, somebody may manipulate it. So lot of things are subject to tampering when it is physical document. When we talk about e-contract or electronic document, suppose if we pay, and in this case, since the stamp duty cannot be paid by Maharashtra through online, the party in Delhi can pay, because in Delhi there is a provision to pay stamp duty online. In Bangalore it is a provision to pay online. So Stock Holding Corporation has tie-up with 19 states. So all these states recognize the stamp duty paid on the stock holding website if it is a party residing in that particular state or jurisdiction. So as far as this agreement has to be executed, what will I do in the best case where it will stand in the law? I will ask my client in Delhi to pay the stamp duty of 500 rupees because that is the maximum as per the Mumbai party or Maharashtra is concerned. So there is no question of deficit of stamp duty. Then I affix my signature on it When you affix a digital signature, there is an option which says, do you want to lock the document so that nobody can add, edit, modify, or you want to just affix your signature, and there is a reason which is there. So you say I am the first party to this agreement and I am affixing my signature. Then that file is sent through your official email ID to the person. That person downloads the PDF file. He affixes or she affixes their signature. After affixing it, they will lock the document. So no further signature can be affixed, no further tampering can be done. Now that PDF file again sent back to the client is a complete execution of this agreement. Both will have a PDF document, and this document signed by both the parties with the digital signature ensures that there is no tampering of whatsoever nature, and it is a proper electronic document, electronic contract properly executed, because you don't require any witnesses or any notary for any business agreements. People take it for safe sense of security that okay, we have done an entry into the notary, so it is in front of the people. If tomorrow he or she disputes or denies that I have not signed it, the notary can attest and say no, it was in front of me, before me, we have attested it. In the case of digital signature, the signature is issued uniquely to a user. I can have 3 signatures, all 3 in my name. There is no bar for you to have only one signature. But to issue your signature, your physical documents are required. Your passport, your Aadhaar, your PAN card, your bank statement, any 2 documents of this. Once verified, you are allocated a hardware token with a signature certificate which belongs to you, and that is your electronic identity. Now if this hardware token is given to somebody else and the password is shared, and if the person misuses it or uses it under your instruction, it is as good as you signing the document. You cannot then say that I did not sign it, it was given to him, because it is protected with a password and it is physical in nature with a hardware token. So only the person who owns it can affix it, nobody else can do it. Most of the CAs, they do not take any authorization from their clients before using their signature for filing returns or otherwise. So most of them are doing, as per the law of IT Act, they are doing cyber crime, because there is no consent taken, there is no authorization taken. The reason of this signature came into hardware token was because lot of CAs were misusing the signatures which were earlier in a PXF file. Earlier there was a file called .px file, PXF, that was a signature certificate which was used to affix on a document, which got changed, and hardware tokens are now issued by, there are only 4 players, CIFI, eMudhra, Encode and IDB RBT, who are giving this signature certificate for any user who wants to procure it. Even your website has a signature certificate. That is a different thing which maybe some other day when we talk we will focus that. Now this agreement, any questions for understanding the agreement execution between a party in Bombay and Delhi through real signatures? Now there is a dispute, and this document has to be produced in the court of law to ensure that this is the agreement on which the transaction happened or the association happened. How will you prove that this document is genuine, electronically admissible in the court of law? So 65B gives you 4 conditions. It says the way in which the document is procured, the way in which the document is printed on a paper and then submitted, you have to document it with a 65B affidavit certificate. So this certificate would be, for example, in this case would be, suppose if I am the first party to this agreement and I am producing this as evidence in the court of law, my certificate of 65B would read as, I, Vicky Shah, so and so, residing at so and so, hereby affix a document which is printed on a paper which has a hash value. Now there is this hash value is nothing but a signature of a file. Just like we all have unique DNA, every electronic file on the computer has a unique value which is known as hash, or MD5 algorithm is an algorithm which is used to calculate this hash value. If you change the content or you add a full stop or you remove a full stop, the MD5 hash will change. So this hash value is calculator of this document, the PDF file which is sent to me. The PDF file which is sent to me would be only after it has been signed by the other party. I cannot take a hash value after signing my signature because that will not tally with the actual signature. The moment another signature is affixed, the second party affixes and locks the document, this document becomes a complete document, uneditable document without any alteration or tampering. and the hash is calculator of this file which is affixed with both the signatures and not only one signature. So there is an algorithm, there is a software which is used to calculate the hash value. You have to put this file in that software. This software will do the calculation as per the algorithm. It will give a value which will be hexadecimal in nature, A, B, C, D, F, 5, 3, 7, 6, C, A, 2, something, something, some 16 digit 256 character value. This value is a hash value of this file. So when I take a printout of the e-contract, which is a PDF file, to produce it in the court of law, I have to accompany a certificate which says that this PDF file is named so and so, agreement between the parties, dated so and so, the date of, because every file when it is created, it has a creation date in the computer. Created date is so and so, has a hash value so and so, calculated as per the algorithm MD5, SHA1, whichever you choose, because both are acceptable as per the IT Act. Hash value is so and so, taken through the laptop which you use. So suppose I am using my Windows machine for taking the printout, I have to mention that Windows machine. If I take Mac, I have to mention that Mac machine. Then the printer which I use, so I have to maintain the model of the printer. As on date, the day that I have taken printout, it is fully functioning and working as on date, because tomorrow this may be referred after 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. That point of time this hardware or this laptop may not be available. So the law says that you have to mention on the current date when you take the printout, the machine which is used, the printer which is used, the model number which is used has to be explicitly mentioned in that. He has taken a printout on so and so date and hereby refers to the agreement which is in dispute and produced in the court for admissible of electronic evidence. Once you have this accompanying certificate with you, then only your PDF document, which is an agreement signed electronically between the parties, will be admissible in the court of law as a electronic evidence, because it's a document which requires a authenticity or validation from the individual. Otherwise anybody can give a signature, anybody can give a certificate. In the case of using digital signature, your life is simple, because the PDF file itself, when you are using or accessing in a soft copy, the moment you click on the signature, the property file opens up. Most of you have MTNL phones at home. Do you get the MTNL bill in your email? It is pre-signed with the digital signature of the responding MTNL office. Suppose I stay in Girgaon, I have a MTNL office in Gamdevi. The Gamdevi officer signature is affixed on the document when it comes as an e-bill to me, and when I click on it, it becomes green. Even your Aadhaar for that matter, when you get a e-Aadhaar, it's a question. The moment you click on the question, it becomes verified and it becomes right. So after that right, you can give the printout, but again you will have to have a certificate for it. The reason being, I can have a technique called screenshot, wherein I can take a certain screenshot, select a window and affix it and put it on a document. So that will show the tempering of it. In the case of PDF file, when the second person signs with a signature and locks the document, you cannot do a tempering on it unless the password is given by the file which is there. So that's why it is 100% foolproof. The moment we affix a certificate and we give this document, it will be accepted by the court of law. Then comes the question of mobile recordings. People use this software, which is not, either somebody pay for it or somebody use free software which is available on your Google Store or App Store, and you do a recording of a call. How will you present this recording of a call in the court of law so that it becomes admissible? Firstly, we need to inform the other side that you are recording the call, which we don't do. Otherwise, the moment we do, the person will disconnect the call. Most of the call centers or helpline numbers, wherever you call, they always say this line is getting recorded for training purposes. So always they will have this as a record for future references. In the case of one-to-one, the moment you inform the person that you are recording the call, the person will not talk properly or he will disconnect the call. So you don't disclose that and you take the recording. So that becomes a breach of privacy, because you are not taking the consent of the other side before recording the call. But still you want to produce this in the court of law. So what you do is, your phone will have a memory card, SD card, which will be storing this, or it will maybe in the internal memory. So if it is stored in the internal memory, there is a different procedure. If it is stored on the external card, it is a different procedure, because there is the option on your software when you do call recording, it asks you by default save to what, internal memory or card. So firstly you have to choose the memory card. Preferably in the case when you think that this call will be required, have a specifically new card taken prior to the call initiation, because your other data which is there on the card may also be required to be submitted along with the card if the original source of evidence is asked by the court. So blank card should be there. Do a call, let the call be recorded. After the call is recorded, you have to connect it with the computer, because you cannot directly take the audio out. In the court, either you can give it on a pen drive, you can give the memory card, you can give it on a CD. The best option is to give a CD, because it is, again, you can have an option in the CD to have read only and one time write. So nobody can do a multi-session, retemper it, add anything in that particular CD. So then in that case, you have to not only take the hash value of that audio clip, because you will get a hash of the audio. After that audio which is hashed calculated, you have to, when you write the CD, you have to take a hash of the CD also, because once the data is burned on a CD, it becomes a storage media. Both the hash will be documented again in the same format. I so and so using the computer so and so have calculated the hash value of this particular audio clip, file name so and so on the memory drive with the serial number so and so, because once you connect this device to the computer, you get all the serial number, capacity, make, model, if it is Candice, it is Transcend, whatever may be. So that everything has to be detailedly documented. The moment you document it, and then you say that this CD which is there has a voice recording which is presented in the court, again taken from this computer with a CD writer model so and so, if it is Sony, external, Buffalo, whatever may be the company, make, name, you have to mention that entire procedure from where you are capturing it to where you are writing it and then you are presenting it. If this is not properly documented, then the admissibility would be in question. There are a lot of case laws in the recent past where court have not admitted the electronic record because they were not accompanied by 65B certificate. So in spite of you getting evidence, it will not be accepted by the court of law. There is only one exception in the case of call details record, CDR. Suppose if there is a case where a CDR is present in the court as for evidences. So in the case of CDR, 65B is not required, because they have a nodal officer which is designated to depose in the court when required. If there is no nodal officer who is likely to come, then they also have to give the 65B certificate along with the CDR, which will be in a CD form, because CDR is into lakhs of pages. It is not a very simple that you can take 100 printout and give it. On an average, the CDRs are huge in numbers. We have seen in cases of arbitration which are 2007, 8, 9, there are spiral bound size of this pages which has CDRs. So it is difficult for even the court to see which number on which date. So if a soft copy PDF file is there which is not tempered or uneditable, you can do a search operation and find out how many calls were made or how many calls were received, because that logs gives you the information. So it becomes easy even for the court and for the prosecutor or defense to rely upon it and search it faster. If I were to give you 1000 page of document, just to scan and search you require a month's time to come and prepare your notes with the pages, that this particular record on this date and time amounts to be that particular, relates to the offense or so and so. So in the case of CDR, if the CDR printouts are given, then you will have to have a 65B. If a CD is given and the person deposed, then he gives undertaking and he is 65B in himself, because he is the authorized person on behalf of the telecom company to take this data from the archive, produce in a readable format and produce in the court of law. This 65B also is for you. So I assume most of you are lawyers here. You are practicing, your clients comes to you and they want to file a complaint of cybercrime. So they also, whatever evidence they give, email printout, email header, that also have to be accompanied by 65B during the complaint itself. People, otherwise police will ask you that you give us 65B for this, because we cannot admit this. When we file the charge sheet, they will ask us to give the source of it. So better that when you file a police complaint, along with the complaint, whatever electronic records you are submitting, email header, email printout, screenshots, the best thing is you should convert everything into a PDF file. Most of the browsers have inbuilt PDF now. Chrome has inbuilt PDF, Mozilla has inbuilt PDF, Safari has inbuilt PDF. Why should you do PDF? The date and timestamp will be of that particular date. When you do printout, the header and the footer, every printer has a different setting. You don't want that extra line to be printed, so you remove that. And once you remove it, the authenticity of that paper itself is in question. How did it generated? From where it got generated? Whether it was from browser based system, or whether it was from your Outlook mail, or from Thunderbird, or from Apple mail. Sometimes we get complaints where there is a mobile, suppose he receives a message. Now that message is related to me, but he is not ready to forward, because if he forwards, he is also party to the crime. So what I do, I take a photo from his mobile, there is a message displayed, I take a photo of it, and this photo I take a printout and give it to the police station for evidence, or this is what I produce as evidence. Then again I have to narrate the entire procedure about how I have captured this photo, how it is related or affected to me in person, the way in which I procured it, I calculate the hash of it, and then I do, because somebody may create some fake data or fake message, printout can be taken, it can be given. We have got a very recent case where there is, typically the NGOs and groups or associations where there are people members and elections happening, people not appointed properly, so there is a defamatory message which goes on in the group. So in such cases, all the concern, you don't require to have affidavit of evidence of all the people who are part of the group. Anyone, because WhatsApp allows you to send that email to your own ID or to any other ID. When you go to the option, clear chat, email chat, there is an option. Email chat along with the images also. So you can do that, because when you register with WhatsApp, you have to register with your own email ID. Your own mobile number is linked. So that self email can also be considered, provided you follow the process of 65B and give a affidavit of certificate along with that what is the way in which you procured electronic evidence. If the certificate is not there, this evidence may not be considered by the court. So whenever you get a client who suffers or who is a victim of cyber crime, where he has got some message on WhatsApp, same procedure for WhatsApp, because WhatsApp also you can either have it in internal memory or external cards, but typically WhatsApp will always be in your internal memory. You have to physically transfer the data from the internal to the external card after the WhatsApp is closed. You cannot do it during the WhatsApp, because WhatsApp installation files are always in the internal memory of the phone. So whatever data you are capturing or copy pasting in another folder, you have to even document that procedure, that the folder by default is the internal memory, was separately copy pasted in the folder in a memory card to produce in the court of law. This procedure, if you don't follow, the question of admissibility will arise. So we talk about call recording, we spoke about WhatsApp, we spoke about e-agreements. There is also something called as IP addresses which are received by the ISPs. So most of the ISP also have to give 65B certificate. Suppose if you have clients who are into providing internet connections, because they want a legal officer or lawyer to help them to provide that affidavit or certificate to produce those logs in the court, because under the criminal procedure code, under section 91, officers request the service providers to produce the logs of the concerned document in the particular case. So each of this officer who is giving this document, again they have to say, and typically what happens in these companies, or even say for that example banks or ATM machines, there is some ATM fraud, a CCTV footage is required to be produced in the court, or a transaction history is to be required to be produced in the court. So each of this electronic record, wherever they are archived or retrieved from, the entire procedure has to be mentioned. And in these companies, typically they do not have data only at one place, they will have data at multiple places because of backup and business continuity. So whichever server was used to fetch that data on the day which is given to the police authorities or for producing of evidence, that particular relevant server's details should be mentioned in that. People make, they don't mention this, they just say that we have a system which keeps the logs, we have archived it, we have got these logs of this particular user, this IP was given on this date and this time to this user, and these are his login logout details. So that is a log which is supposed to be tendered in the court. It is a printout, it could be a printout, it could be a CD depending on the number of logs. The more old logs or more size of the logs, it will always be in a CD format, because practically each session of internet, like today we are all having this, thanks to Jio, 4G is free. At every second there are 10 records being created of your logs of internet access on your phone. This is the bare minimum. In the laptop when you use, it will be much more, because your system is getting updated, your antivirus is getting updated, your YouTube is getting streamed, your emails are being attached. So n number of things, n number of records in the ISP server. So practically it is difficult to give you 10,000 printouts and to produce in the court of law. So what they do, they give you a CD with the entire logs from the start time to the end time when the request is made by the law enforcement. So that's why all this certificate has to be accompanied by 65B. Now interesting question comes here, most of the officers at police station, they type your statement in Marathi. They say माझा जवाब मला मराठीमध्ये समजून टंकलिपित करून टाइप करून प्रिंट करून मला कळवले आहे आणि मी साइन करतो. Whether that will require 65B or not? Because it is again a computer printout taken by police officer from his machine. It will not. Why? There is an exception. It is typed on the instructions of the person. There is nothing generated. Electronic evidence, if when to be given a 65B is when it is generated from the electronic system. If you see voice, it is generated through the conversation. If you see WhatsApp, it is generated through the transmission. If you see ISP logs, it is through the way we are using or browsing the net. If you see telecom, the way we make call, the call establishes, then only it gets registered in the server. Otherwise, missed call does not get registered. Then you talk about bank transaction. If the end-to-end transaction is successful and the money is withdrawn, then only that cycle is complete. So each data which is stored, then only 65B is required. Now in this case of police, what happens is they are typing under your instructions. That मी इकडे वरील पत्ता राहतो, मला असं असं समजलं, मला एक मेल आली, त्या दिवशी कंटेंट असं पाहिलं. So you are narrating and he is typing it for convenience. It is not that he is generating some evidence from that computer. That's why 65B is not applicable there. But if you see our CRPC, police officer has to provide a paper and a pen to the complainant if he comes to police station. In this case, instead of providing paper and pen, they are giving you a computer to type it. You see the relationship? However, CRPC requires amendment that this part of electronic typing should be included. But at this point of time, it does not include that. It just says if a complaint comes to you, the police officer should ensure that the person is provided with a pen and a paper to draft or write his complaint. Unfortunately, here what happens is not every complaint becomes FIR. Because there would be some cognizable aspect to it, some non-cognizable aspect to it. They will do their verification, checking. If it is very clearly evident, like one of the case, I've got a recent case day before yesterday. One employee received a obscene content on her official company email ID from a private email account. Private email means Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail and so on. Most of you as a lawyer, I would suggest you, if you are not using your own domain, start it from the 1st of January in the new year. Take a domain of your own name. It is only 500 rupees per year. That becomes more authentic because you can legally send documents, receive the mails. If you have received the terms and conditions of the Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, it very clearly says this email account is used for personal use only. It will not be used for any commercial legal purpose. We will not give you any support in the case required. Nobody reads that 25-26 pages. We just say I agree, finish, accept, and you start using it. The moment you do that, we have got a case where we have successfully defended it because Gmail was used. There is no legal locus standi for that email to be used for commercial purpose. Whatever transactions were sent or communication were sent should not be relied upon, and it is acceptable by the court because it's a free account. If you are using a Gmail, Yahoo, you can make it paid account by paying 1,500 per year. If you have your own domain, it is 500 rupees per year. You get 2 email IDs. You take a call which is simpler and easy for you to manage, but you should insist on using official email communication. Don't use Gmail, Yahoo for your business or authentic communications. Because tomorrow if you are sending an email, I have like last 3 years I have not sent a legal notice in a letterhead to any of my client or other side. I am sending them notices through digital signatures on their email ID. Even if their email ID is Gmail or Yahoo, because they have mentioned on that visiting card, it is assumed that this is used by him. So they cannot say this is not my official email ID. We draft the complaint notice in a PDF file, affix the signature, log the document, send it on the email, have a read receipt initiated. So whenever the mail goes to him, I get a read receipt that the mail was read by them. The moment I get that, my service is served. I am not sending any physical notices. Only when there is a government requirement where I have to do it, I use India Post and I send it through registered AD or Speed Post AD. Otherwise, most of the notices which we send are through digital signatures. They cannot deny it because signature cannot be forged. That signature has a unique certificate number given to me for 2 years. After 2 years that gets expired, I have to buy a new signature. I can continue to buy from the same company, I can change the vendor also. It does not mean that my signature will become invalid, because that reference will always be verifiable whenever they want from the certifying authority who has issued me the signature. So that is the importance of digital signature. Going forward, now it is Aadhaar, but after 5 years we will talk that we will have to, everybody will have to give a signature. You will have to get a digital signature for yourself. Without that you cannot do anything online. It will come very fast. Right now we are taking time even to accept it, but as we progress, most of the things will become online. Everybody of us will be required to have a digital signature, and because that everybody cannot afford to have a signature, currently it costs around 250 to 400 rupees per year depending on the service provider who is giving you the signature. So why would you procure it when you only require it for filing income tax or using it for official purpose? Why should you get signature? So that's why they came with a concept called e-sign, which is temporary signatures. What does this mean? Suppose there are tri-party, we need to have an agreement executed between 3 parties. One party is in Delhi, one is in Bombay, one is in Bangalore. Either I have to take a printout in 3 stamp papers, 3 copies, all 3 constitute to be one, give to each party one original, or I make a PDF file, affix a signature, other party affixes the signature, third party affixes the signature, locks the document. This document is valid across the 3 parties. To do so, what is also required is electronic, this real signature which is in the hardware format. There are authorized companies by certifying authorities which are giving you e-sign. So I don't have a signature with me, neither he has, but we want to get into agreement. So what we do? So there is a service called e-sign. What does e-sign do? When the document comes to me, it is actually fed in a central system. It's a software. That software is again non-editable, it is tamper proof because it has a signature certificate embedded in the server. This PDF file is visible to all 3 of us. We all 3 can sign simultaneously or at our own conveniences. It will be through Aadhaar. So we get a OTP on Aadhaar. Moment we get OTP, we put the OTP. Our system which is used at that particular time, that timestamp is affixed on that signature, so as the other parties. So these 3, for that temporary purpose of that agreement, we all got a digital signature only for that particular transaction. So it is a e-sign, which is a temporary digital signature. It is not different. In the case of digital signature, I have to have a hardware token with me 24/7. Only when that is there with me, I can affix the signature. What if I don't have that, but I still want to sign and I am traveling somewhere? So through e-sign, for that temporary date and time, the record will be maintained that this signature of e-sign is given to this user with Aadhaar number so and so, with mobile number so and so, which belongs to me only. So I cannot deny that somebody else got OTP on my number and I gave the OTP and he signed it from there. The responsibility of protecting the OTP and the Aadhaar is mine. Same way, responsibility of protecting the real signature is mine. So e-signs, we are encouraging a lot of our clients to use e-signs for e-contracts. You don't have a signature, fine. There is a software authorized by the government of India. They have got a reseller license from their provider. So CDEC is one of them. CDEC is giving you e-sign services. eMudra is giving you e-sign services. There is one company in Bangalore called Legal Desk which is giving e-sign services. In fact, Legal Desk has tied up with some 19 states also. So they even do procure stamp paper and give you that also. So there are a lot of companies. DigiCo is one. Then you have, so there are 5-6 companies who are authorized for this. All of their names are mentioned on the government website. You can avail any of the services. Put a PDF file in that central server. Let the concerned parties wherever they are in India sign it. We have even used this for signing from our abroad clients. So there are agreements between US client and India. So they don't believe in stamp paper because there is no concept of stamp paper there. It is only in our country we have a stamp paper concept. So we use signature, digital signature. We ask them to sign. If there is an Indian origin person, then we ask them to go to their embassy, Indian embassy, get it notarized or affidavit and then send it to us. Or we send a PDF file. They sign through their signature certificate, we sign through our signature certificate. perfectly valid. Nobody can say it is a illegal document. The only thing where this is not applicable, so you cannot have a will created through online. You cannot have the IT Act is not applicable to negotiable instruments. It is not applicable to immovable property. So I cannot do a registration transfer of properties through e-sign or digital signatures. For that I have to go to the sub-register office and I can do it. I can't use it there. I cannot have trust deeds or trust documents through this particular thing, and I cannot give a power of attorney under the IT Act. So except this 5, all things are allowed. This is a very clear cut exception given in the IT Act, where the IT Act says it is not applicable, and where IT Act is not applicable, digital signature is not applicable, because digital signature has got the legality from the IT Act. Further, when we talk about Evidence Act, I'll just go through and read the provision why from, I've been talking that you have to give all details. Where does it come from? So it comes from section 65B, subsection 4, which clearly says, in any proceedings where it is desired to give a statement evidence by virtue of this section, a certificate doing any of the following things, this is to say, identifying the electronic record containing the statement and describing the manner in which it was produced, how it was produced. So that entire procedure from this machine, from this printer, from this model, giving such particulars of any device involved in the production of that electronic record. So if you are using pen drive, MSD card, CD-ROM, you have to give all the details of the devices, as may be appropriate for the purpose of showing that the electronic record was produced by a computer, because under the IT Act there is one definition called communication device. Earlier we used to have a different definition for computer, a mobile, a palm top, a PDA. Now communication device is a generic term defined under the IT Act which covers all your devices which does input, output, storage and process. So by default your mobile also becomes a communication device, your laptop becomes a communication device, the servers which are involved becomes a communication device. Dealing with any of the matter which conditions mentioned in the subsection 2, then again it refers to subsection 2, there are again 4 conditions given here. The computer output containing the information was produced by the computer during the period over which the computer was regularly used to store or process information. Suppose if I do not use this machine for my regular logs, I only use it for temporary purpose, then that may not be allowed because it has to be daily used. It very clearly says the computer output containing information was produced by the computer during the period over which the computer was used regularly to store or process information for the purposes of any activities regularly carried out over that period by the person having lawful control over the use of computer. Now this typically helps in a case where suppose you are asking some evidence from a company. Now in a company one department is in charge of all this. In that department there are 4 people who are working on this. Out of the 4 only 2 are authorized to deal with this. So the 65B certificate should come from that 2 authorized person, not from the department or otherwise, because it says a person who is having lawful control over that use of computer. If I am not authorized to use that and I depose it, it will be not valid. If it is in my control, my supervision, then only I can give the 65B to it, otherwise it is not acceptable. Further a section says, during the said period, information of the kind contained in the electronic record or the kind from which the information so contained is derived was regularly fed into the computer in ordinary course of the said activities. So typically when you get a accounting statement, in your dispute, summary suits, recovery, the tally statement is given as ledger accounts, but none of either the accountant or the chartered accountant should certify it, and he has to give a 65B for that, because he is feeding the information regularly in the course of business. So all your certificates should be either by the accountant if it is in-house accountant, if it is outsourced work given to a CA firm, then that particular CA firm and the accountant who is dealing with that data of the customer, who is feeding the information and doing the tally of it or ledger of it, he has to give a 65B. Throughout the material part, the said part, the computer was operating properly. So that's why that model number, printer number and the date is required, because on that day it was working properly. Today it may not be working properly because they have life, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. If you have kids at home, 2 years, depending on how it is. So that's why they say you have to write it when it was operating properly. So date is important. In respect of any period in which it was not operating properly, suppose sometimes there is evidence which is asked after 6 months and this data was there with us in another computer, but that computer got replaced because it got crashed. So we took the backup of the data and we put in a new computer. So here that portion comes, if it is not the one original, then you have to specify that this was done from a new machine because it was backed up. You have to go into that detail. Just to ensure that there is no effect on the modification or tampering of the electronic record. This section and this details is required just to prove that during the entire procedure of procurement of electronic record, there was no tampering done with that. Otherwise, the entire admissibility is in question. And last is the information contained in the electronic form reproduces or is derived from such information fed into the computer in the ordinary course of said activities. So this computer should be used for that particular purpose only. We have seen companies, specifically create a computer to give a 65B, just to ensure that this is a document come from our computer. That will not survive because your date time will change, your timestamp will change. In the computer, it is very difficult to change something called as access and modified date. You can manipulate the create date. Okay, I can change my computer date to 1st October 2017. I can create a file and I can again change the date back. So create date can be modified, but access date and modified date cannot be tampered with. You cannot change or tamper the access of the file and modification of the file. So that's why when the evidence is taken, this is primarily known as MAC timers, modified, access, created. All these three dates are taken into account. So that's why when you give a 65B certificate, or when we file a police complaint for a cybercrime matter and we are taking a evidence or printout from our client's computer, we have to mention that. And never take computers or email printouts from your own office computers. Ask the client to get it from their servers, from their office or from their residence, because they are the ones where they have seen it first. If it comes to you, then you have to again say that the client had sent us in the mail, through the email, then I have taken the printout. That additional line will again come into picture. So it is always better to give the, and this 65B came into picture only because there is no other way to give an electronic record in the best possible format in the court. Actually speaking, it's a paper. It's not that we are giving electronic evidence in electronic format in the court and court is accepting it. It is a document certificate which is taken a printout, which we are endorsing the electronic evidence and submitting in the court. So ultimately it is a paper. We have also seen where there are some companies, MNCs, they give you this logs of CDs or PDF files with a signature, digital signature affixed on it. Once a digital signature is affixed, then I don't have to go into the nitty-gritties because it is an authentic record. Under section 3 and 4 of IT Act, legal recognition of electronic record is very clearly specified. So once it satisfies those sections, the PDF file with a signature, digital signature which is validated is acceptable. There are sometimes people, they just give you, signature is affixed, they take a printout, then they scan that document and then send you. It is a very good high resolution scan, but you cannot validate the signature. So that becomes invalid. Only if the signatures are validated, you can validate it, that signal, question mark becomes right or a green in color or a golden green in color, then only it is acceptable that this document which has a signature affixed on it, it is an electronic document. And to produce this electronic document and record in the court, 65B is must. So any complaint henceforth which you are likely to file for cyber or otherwise in your normal course of civil disputes or criminal disputes where you have accounting statements for summary suits and otherwise, insist that the chartered accountants give you 65B for the ledger account copy, because that will help you to, tomorrow they cannot deny or dispute the document which is given by them. Even I have been also practicing in NCLT, they take the accounts as the statement as a base for the claim, admission of liability. So that also has to be taken with a 65B, because it's an electronic record which is given by somebody and put in the court. There is one very interesting thing which all of us observe daily. This document is electronic generated, does not require signature. It is not acceptable. It is not a valid document. Just because it is auto generated or auto created, that does not mean it is a authentic record. That has to be, so that's why if you see sometimes the court will ask go and get a rubber stamp with the initial of the manager in charge and then produce it, because that has to be certified. So they may not give you a 65B, but the rubber stamp and initial itself certifies that it is a valid document from the bank authority, because it is on the letterhead of the bank, which we do not have access to. So there are certain situations where 65B is applicable, certain situations it is not. But any electronic document which you think or record which will be in the case is important. SMS also. So when you get a SMS, how do you produce SMS in the court of law? Because SMS has a limited, now the phones have a lot of storage capacity, the memory, there is no issue. Earlier your SMS used to get overwritten, or you have to delete the earlier SMS, then you used to get new SMSs. Because of smartphones we have unlimited capacity now, so you can have n number of SMSs produced or available. So that SMS either you can link, so every phone has their corresponding computer software. So either you can load that phone in that software and then take a printout, or the SMS screenshot, all the phones are enabled with screenshot facility. So you take a screenshot, and when you produce it you say that the phone has a function of taking a screenshot, it was taken on so and so date and time, and this is the SMS which was received or sent, and then you produce it. So even that is admissible provided you follow this particular procedure of mentioning how you procured it. I am open to any questions if you have any questions in particular about this. So mostly I covered the 65B electronic contract and how you produce it. So if you have any questions on this or you want more information, you can ask.
So when one practices law or medicine, we enjoy certain privileges. Even as per the High Court, we can practice profession from our residences. Architects and others cannot. So can this privilege be extended to the use of Gmail? Like it doesn't fall into commercial or business. So if I'm interacting with my client, that is my fees or this is what I want, I feel it should fall into the exception.
See, Gmail is a company, right? And before you take your Gmail account, it clearly tells you what are the rights of use. So whether you use it for your personal use, for Facebook and leisure, there is no denial of using it. But when you are, though you are lawyers, you are doing a noble profession, or you are doing, like a service to the community by helping them, there is a sense of, if you see, there is a section 126 called privileged communication in the Evidence Act. Whatever you discuss with your client is privileged. Otherwise also, what if your Gmail account is not secure or safe? If it gets compromised, then what? The advantage of a paid account, that doesn't mean if you have a paid account, it will not get hacked. Okay? Each account is prone to get compromised or compromised by some or the other means. But the sense of security is more because the service provider from where you take the email, tomorrow if required that this email account belongs to you only, that person will come in the court to depose for you. Gmail will not come. It will say it is a free account, we are not bound to give you any information. How will you prove that this was you or this was not you in the case when you require that? See, domain, getting your own domain or getting a proprietorship name, whatever you use, 300 rupees, 500 rupees a year is not a big amount. Okay? Though you are doing a community service, Gmail itself says that if you want to use it for commercial purpose, you take a paid account. And we give you support. We give you 24/7 support. They give you phone support. If your account gets compromised, you can reset the password immediately by verifying your details. In the case of free Gmail account, even if you go and do a police complaint, by the time it comes, they only tell you last access details. They don't give you who, what, why, because they are not bound to. As per the US privacy law, they have a different policy. As per the Indian context, they have a different policy. Do you know that gmail.com also has emails with googlemail.com extension? This Google Mail is for UK servers. If they have a specific requirement for the specific country. Most of you are using Aadhaar. Do you know on Aadhaar website there is a provision to block your biometric? Yes, few of them are knowing, few of them are not. So what does that mean? Only when I have to authenticate, I have to go to the website, unlock it for 10 minutes, automatically after 10 minutes it gets locked. So my biometric is safe. If I am now, if I have a habit of speaking like this and somebody takes a picture of my palm or finger with a high resolution, they can practically misuse my biometric. I can prevent it because Aadhaar allows me to lock my biometric till the time I want it to be unlocked. E-sign, Aadhaar based OTP. The only issue with Aadhaar is that it is purely dependent on the mobile number. If your service provider goofs up and allocates that SIM card to somebody else, your bank, everything is messed up because Aadhaar is with linked to mobile number. So there should be some solution, a second level in which email and mobile both should be validated before the Aadhaar gets changed. You can change your Aadhaar details by giving a OTP online. There is a new fraud now. Earlier we used to get only debit card fraud, credit card fraud, somebody is asking OTP. Now people are saying that we are from UIDAI, we are validating your Aadhaar, you must have got a OTP, please give us that. In fact, they are trying to change the Aadhaar details. They take the OTP, they change the mobile number. So all the alerts and other details are now on that mobile, and because Aadhaar is linked with that mobile number and Aadhaar is linked with the bank account, then they do fraud. We have got 2 cases of that. You can educate a user to a certain extent, not otherwise. So your question to answer again, it will be the prerogative of Gmail to allow or not, but I would suggest not to. If see, it's not about affordability also, but it is about sense of responsibility also. If you have your own domain email or a company name, suppose you use a particular like Hammurabi, we have a hammurabi.com domain name, it gives an identity to that particular proprietor or a group of people, right?
Largely the reason behind was it whether it is arguable and researchable topic that
It is a, see, every topic in law is researchable subject to, right? There is nothing which is definite. But why are we discussing this in the best interest or practices? The moment you have a paid domain, the entire impression of the client also changes towards you. You know, Gmail, Yahoo, we have got people still today, there are few seniors who don't even, they have email account in Gmail, Yahoo, but they don't check it. Their staff checks it. If they goof up, it is as good as he is responsible for it. Then you cannot say though that I was not using it, it was used by my staff. Your Aadhaar also asks you for an email account. Now that will always be Gmail or Outlook or Yahoo or Hotmail or whatever. Again a free account. Only thing now what is good after the number of portability which came in 2008-9, rather no 14, no 12. So when the number portability came, this number is now your property because you have the power to choose the service provider, unlike earlier where you have to be only with a particular service provider. In fact, you can even give this number to somebody in the will because this becomes your property. Mobile number portability gives that new option. It's my tangible property. That number belongs to me now. I can choose Vodafone, Airtel, Jio, Reliance is now stopped, but Tata, whatever. So I can give this number, after me this person should be using it. Whether it will be admissible, acceptable, I don't know, but it is still, because it is my property now. Unlike earlier when I was a customer, I was using a service from a particular operator, but after number portability, this number belongs to me. The another thing is what we are also discussing, and I am part of many forums also. We suggest that the TRAI should come out with a strict guidelines for telecom because they just left, right and center issue SIM cards to anybody who goes and say we have. So like for example, I know his name and I know his mobile number. I go to operator, say, you know, I forgot my phone in train, I want to block it. That person will not even bother to call before blocking it. He will block it for temporary purpose. Then they will say go and ask, take a police certificate, then we will give you a SIM card, otherwise we will not give you. And police station you go, model number so and so, number so and so, in the train I lost. They will write it and give it to you. Whether that is actually belonging to you or not, nobody verifies. Nobody even calls or bothers to make an attempt. I have got a case where 25 lakhs were siphoned off from an account because this gentleman went to the Reliance store. This is my mobile number. I have lost my mobile in rickshaw. Please issue me a new SIM card. And this is my documents. So there were 2 documents given by this particular fraudster. One was Aadhaar card, one was passport. Both were having the same name, but birth dates were different, addresses were different. Still this person on the other side, passport, Aadhaar, original SIM verified, SIM card. That SIM card was linked with the current account of the bank. OTPs were received on the mobile number, 25 lakhs transferred. Now who will you blame here, bank or this telecom operator? There were another story to this case only. The bank, you know, there are 2 types of limits in your accounts. One is per transaction limit and one is per day limit. This by default in a current account, your limit is set to 2 lakhs per transaction and 5 lakhs per day, it is the prerogative of the customer to go and change it to 2 lakhs per day and per transaction, or 5 lakhs per day and 25 lakhs per day, or 5 lakhs per transaction. So banks will send you an email. You know, lot of mails comes. We know we don't read. They take a implied permission. We are increasing the limit by default to this amount. If you have any objection, come to the branch, else this is acceptable by you. Now that email was sent. So when you send that email and you as a customer do not respond to it, it means you are allowing the bank to change your limit. Original limit was X amount. After this, the amount got changed. Then the fraud happened. Now whether the bank is liable or the customer is liable. The intimation was done. You did not say no. That doesn't mean it is yes.
Deemed consent.
Implied and explicit consent. So there are a lot of things which, because of online system in coming into picture, for privacy, by default all of us have given consent to all the apps. If we don't give, the app will stop working. If you don't want to use, then you have to discontinue using the app. Otherwise all your information is available to them. So case to case basis, this will vary. What is the limit? What is the transaction? From where it happened? And we have also educated and told police officers to ensure that whenever somebody comes with a fake or a request of a SIM card, get the last bill if it is a billing customer, get the last recharge amount if it is a prepaid customer. At least that will be handy with them. Otherwise anybody can go and propose that I am Vicky Shah, my mobile is lost, give me a new SIM card, this is my number. Tomorrow I will be in soup. So before doing it, so that's why this Aadhaar linking with mobile is good. You will find less frauds from mobile phones now, because if there are 5 SIM cards in my name, I have given Aadhaar to all these 5 and I give this 5 to different people to use, I will be responsible for it. Right now we don't know who is owning which number. There is one Bhelwala here, opposite Godrej. Okay, I have got passport copies, bank statements, LCs, original copies from him while eating bhel. Original passport, valid passport document, and he gets it from somewhere from Kandivali or somewhere from Pune. So that document is sufficient for a person to do something wrong. Put a photo, take a fake Xerox, go to the operator, get a fake SIM card in that name. Aadhaar will stop that. See, I also was against Aadhaar, but I had to take it because I had to register my marriage. They made it compulsory. Otherwise, there was a different reason for me to not agree with Aadhaar earlier. Now also it is good, but the way it is being dictated like an extortion, if you don't do it will be closed, it's not appropriate. First they should make it secure in such a way that it is beyond a doubt tamper proof. So right now it is purely based on mobile. If your mobile is gone, your Aadhaar is gone, your bank account, everything is for a toss. So that is the biggest issue with Aadhaar right now at this point of time. The moment we have a second level of authentication, or maybe an email with mobile and combination of both, half password should come on mobile, half on email. Once you provide both, then only you can change something. Then Aadhaar becomes foolproof or secure, because very unlikely that your email also will compromise and your mobile also will get compromised. So there should be a second level which is required, or some other medium, whichever can be expert. There are thousands of solutions available in the market. So only that is what the issue. I personally feel, in my personal opinion, that Aadhaar is good except this part of it. Otherwise there is nothing wrong with Aadhaar. Another challenge is most of our fingerprints beyond certain time does not get recognized, because if you have some food particle or sweat or mud, or the pollution is so much, so it does not accept. Then in that case what to do? So there should be some guidelines or approach to work and better it, rather than making it mandatory. But I would suggest, if not for your bank or FDs or mutual funds, but for mobile it should be mandated. At least your mobile frauds will stop, and if the mobile fraud is stopped, automatically it will help in other frauds to get stopped, because everything today is based on mobile.
So in the later part,
Which is the most acceptable format for 65 certificate format?
So very interestingly, there are no standard templates available, unlike the other formats, because it is a case to case basis depending on service provider, ISP, banker, individual, fake profile case, fake email case, email hacking case, bank account case. So each will have different format. But prima facie, these 4 things about model number, date and time, hash value of the data of the file, these 4-5 things are key ingredients which should be there in 65B. Even if you write in a plain letter in not a legal language, it is fine. It doesn't mean I have to be having in a affidavit format only. But because you are a lawyer expected to draft it properly, you are expected to give it in format. But if it is an individual company or a client or a customer, even their own words with all this information covered, it is valid 65. Nobody can.
Notarized? Sorry to interrupt. It has to be notarized?
No. It's a self declaration. No one need to notarize.
As we were talking about the evidence of documents, I just wanted to ask one thing, that what is the difference between a copy which has been downloaded directly from a Bombay High Court website, that is one. Second, authenticated copy, and third, a certified copy. Because some people are ready to accept it directly downloaded. Some are like authenticated copy bhi chalega. Some are like we compulsory need a certified copy.
So certified copies with your stamp of the entry in their diary, when you pay the fees, you get a receipt also. That is certified copy. Authenticate copy, if they authenticate with digital signatures, then that certified copy is also doable. You can give that digital certified copy and give it to the requirement. Now direct copying issue is, if you read that agreement, the High Court itself puts a disclaimer. Have you read it? The first page itself says it's a copy. Just for the knowledge, do not rely, you have to take a certified copy. There is a solution which was proposed to them by a company which is into this digital signature big time. What you can do is, you can have a server level digital signature inbuilt. So each and every order uploaded affixes with the signature and then distributed across. If something of that can be adopted by the High Court or any court, then you will have to, certified copy also not required, authentication not required, because that itself will become both.
Authenticated you get the same day. Certified you get it after like 6 to 7 days.
Because they have to do the procedures in the court, registry, prothonotary, there is an entire procedure,
But
right?
Government institutions, if you want to show it to someone, they easily tell you that we don't accept the copy directly, we don't accept
Because-
the authenticated, we need a certified. And in some cases there's extreme urgency, that this is the order, kindly help me out. This is the order, there's a direction given to you, they won't touch it.
That is the lacuna of the process where I cannot comment, right?
Yeah.
It's something beyond my control. But if you ask me the differentiation between authenticated, certified and a true copy. So true copy even advocates give you by seeing the original ones. Certified copy is by the court with the signed and stamped and sealed. So that is the only one, like for example, any decree to be executed, you have to give a certified copy to the company for registrar, otherwise they will not accept it. But if the same document is given to me by High Court in a digital signature affix format, the company will have to accept it with it, because it's a government certified document which I have no control on. Here my time gets wasted because I have to go there, I have to be in the queue, I have to pay the requisite fees of 7 rupees per page, or I think 4, 5, whatever, X rupees per page.
That system has been followed by Mantralaya, because whenever we take a printout of a GR, we always get a digital signature which has been...
So that is because Mantralaya has taken their services. Why can't the court take it? We have to ask the authorities there, right? I would be the first person to make everything online. But everybody has to accept it. Not everybody could be on the same. Like today, for me to be here and speaking with you, I have spent 14 years in this domain. I was investigator, forensic, compliance, then law. Law is my last degree. This is my 6th degree. And I did law because most of my investigated cases were not getting appreciated in the court of law because of technical thing or evidential value. I said, let me do law to understand where is the investigating getting wrong. So at least now you understand, okay, technically this is how it is, legally this is how it is. So what is the best of both? This. So I can give you that.
Anybody?
Last question, because I have to rush to Kalyan for a friend's marriage. So
So in the later part of your lecture, you told me that we have to be careful as to which document has come from which printer. But in practically, when we sit for a conference, it becomes difficult. We can't ask the client to get the print. So what are the chances of it going fatal for the case and for me as an advocate for cooking up things that everything has been come from the same printer?
see, what is 65B and why is it required? It says that that computer from where you have taken the printout should be fully operational during that time. That is the reason we want the printer number and the computer which is used. If you take it from your office, you have to add one more line that this email was sent by my client and I have taken it from my office. That is the only thing additional which you have to do.
Chances of getting caught if we cook up it. It's just complying with the formalities.
No, there is nothing called as cooked up or see, it's like your best affidavit, and there is one sentence, the above, that verification, we give this clause, it is to the best of my knowledge. That also is the part of this evidence. So whatever is you are giving is in your best possible way. Beyond that, you cannot expect you to be and this may be one of cases where it is required. If it is a practice, then there is a questionable thing of everything. If you do it as a habit, everything is questionable. But if it is one off case, the court is more experienced than me to comment on this rather than me commenting here, because they know from your body language, the way you argue, the way you talk, whether how much you have prepared and how much is your stuff.
So in
No?
forensics it can be called.
No, forensics, then you have to, there's a different thing about proving that 65B is authentic. You are going into the different tangent only. We are not here to discuss. We are here to see how you can have a electronic evidence produced in the court of law. To produce or challenge itself, see, as far as Evidence Act is concerned, section 45A, only handwriting experts and other experts are defined. There is nobody defined as cyber experts. In IT Act, we have a section 79A, wherein officer of certifying electronic record is supposed to be appointed by the government, notified by the central government, and they will give you a certificate for electronic emails and otherwise. Now that position, the law came in 2000, amendment happened in 2009, subsequently rules have been notified till 2015. This January 2017, they came that all the SFL and CSFL, Central Forensic Science Laboratories, and state government forensic laboratories can apply to be a 79A certified electronic evidence certified officer. It came now in this January. So this 17 years we had nobody to give that certificate, and that too it is limited to only central and state government. There are private forensic lab also which say that we give you this certificate, but whether that will be valid or not is again a question, because the law does not give a room for appreciating evidence report from the private labs. In abroad, you have private detective licenses, private investigative licenses, they follow privacy law in place, they have things to comply with. Here to get information is very easy. India is a culture, we have been never taught about privacy in our childhood. If we meet, कैसा चल रहा है, घर में क्या है, कितने भाई बहन है, it's a standard questions. Culturally we are taught to break the ice like this. The same thing abroad is a privacy violation. You can't ask somebody how many brothers, sisters you have, what you have. In the interviews, I got a client who complained, the HR asked, are you going to are you planning for baby in the interview? So she's like, I mean, why did he ask me this question? So this company is an IT company where they give you projects. So if you are planning for a kid or something, they will not give you that abroad project, they will give you a local project. From that perspective, the HR asked the question, but it is a violation of privacy, because how can you ask somebody whether you are going to plan a baby or not? It is like an insult, to ask somebody, are you going to get a kid? You see the repercussions. So I have got a client who says, oh, somebody, this HR asked me whether I am going to get a baby or not. So what case I can file against him? I was like, why? No, there is one project which is going abroad and I am eligible because of my experience. But if I am going to plan, then I will not be sent, because for them it is that 214 days of mandatory leaves and other things are in place. So I said, okay, company is thinking from that perspective, but this question should not have been asked. There could have been other way to put it. What is the other way, we'll have to explore, but this is not the way to ask, right? You asking somebody, are you going to plan baby? And so this is a very insulting question also, because what is your business to know whether I am planning kid or not? So we as a culture, there is a lot of thing required in India. We are not taught to be okay, privacy concern, protect somebody. Asking hello, hi and everything is a very common thing in India. That has to change, that mindset has to change. It will take some time, maybe 2, 3, 5 years, but it will change. If not now, tomorrow definitely.
Where can you buy your book from? You write books, right? So where can you buy it?
You can download a free app. That book I have upgraded and made into a mobile Android app. iOS will be launched in the first week. It's called as Cybercrime Clinic. The Cybercrime Clinic. The app name is Cybercrime Clinic. It covers 54 types of cybercrime which are possibly generically faced by all common men, and how do you prevent yourself from being victim. All the context of cyber cells are also mentioned in that. Preventive tips also are there. Summary of IPC provisions are also there. This book was written in 2011. Amendment came and after 2015, 4th of March, 66A got scrapped because of that order. So under IPC there are some sections where this get covered. So I have amended those and made an app instead of writing a book. So I will be coming with 2, 3 more apps now instead of writing books, because everybody wants everything handy. Book only few people read, or it is in the library, but mobile, anything ready reference you can immediately see.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any
It's
online
a
portal which is available to submit a cybercrime complaint?
in India they are going to set up something called a cyber swachhata something, which is not yet. So in the National Cyber Security Plan for Government of India, they have mentioned to have a central repository. But as far the IT Act is concerned, you can report everything to CERT-In. There is a common email ID, incident@certin.org.in. All the incidents that you face or you are likely to find out of your client or your end, you can send an email to them. That is the reporting email for incidents in cyber in India. So it's a nodal agency. They are supposed, under the IT Act, they are powered to even block websites if required. So they are the nodal agency for the government of India, and they will collect all the information, whichever you report.
Last question. How to give inspection of documents which are procured electronically? Is there a separate procedure?
Okay, so what happens is when you ultimately the document set, what you get is a physical copy, right? And they will say this is all electronic documents which are been print out. So most of them should be accompanied with 65B. If not, then the source could be asked in a read-only copy in a CD, which could be verifiable that the same document has the content which is there on the paper, because sometimes we find people manipulating the pages or skipping the pages when the document comes to us. Now inspection of documents per se will always be physical, it will not be electronically, because here unlike this digital locker which is being planned by the government at a larger scale, or you have a central system where all the documentation, High Court did a very good thing by making everything online and filing, but it diluted it by asking for paper copies. So what is the point of giving in a pen drive and a CD or an email when you ask a paper again? So ultimately paper only will prevail in the court of law.
Can we give an access to the server or the electronic form, the system which we have in the office for the inspection?
So generally where you have a KPO or a LPO system, legal processing or a KPO business, where you get a temporary username and password to have a read-only copy of it, yes, it is doable, but it should be acceptable by the parties. So there is no harm in giving. In fact, it would be better, because at any point of time, whenever they will authenticate with their username and password, they will be able to access the documents. Unless you have a system which changes it at the back end or something, you have to prove that this is a tamper-proof depository. Because what happens is, right now I am able to see a document, but tomorrow if I go, the document may have changed. Then it will be in a question. So rather than that, let us inspection be physical, which exists. And all this, see, this is all best way forward. Unlike the law drafters, they draft the law, but they don't give you the format or the way in which it is accepted. Everybody uses their own wisdom from experience, from mistakes, then they improvise and then they provide it. So this certificate, after making some 70, 80 certificates, today I can say, okay, there are different types of certificates, because ISPs will give you different, mobile will give you different, client will give you different. For this case, it will be different. If you don't have that much exposure to case, you don't even know what to give in that cases, right? So it's all different time and frame. Whenever it comes, we'll encounter those.
Thank you, sir, for giving deep information on this topic. I would request Advocate Rahul Maskar to felicitate our today's guest with moment. I would request our today's guest to write in our guest book and give feedback to Hammurabi tablet. Now I would request to give vote of thanks. I would request Mr. Nilkant Garkar to give vote of thanks.
On behalf of Hammurabi Tablet, I take this opportunity to thank Mr. Vicky Shah for accepting the invitation and have a very wonderful and interactive lecture on a subject which gets neglected. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Further, I extend my thanks to Mr. Vidyut and Ms. Delna for their continuing support. And last but not the least, all of you, all our regular members, regular visitors, and all the new people over here, continue supporting us. Let's see. Thank you.
Till the time our guest is writing, I'll announce our next program, which is on 20 of January, and this time we are having scope of practice in income tax, and we have called Shyam Walvi, who is a senior standing counsel of income tax department himself. So he'll be telling us the various scopes which are there, because when I spoke to Shyam, we could not count more than 10. So that is the scope. How many great tax practitioners are there? We could not count more than 10 itself. So that's the scope of it. So Shyam Malvi is going to come and enlighten us on this particular topic. So do come on 28th, same time, same place, and have the interaction with Shyam Malvi. One more program which I am announcing today, which Hammurabi tablet is starting from January 2018, and that is called Study Circle program. Now this will be held on every 4th Saturday, but because of the lack of funds, we won't be arranging it here, because we have funds with us by which we can arrange one program in a 1 month here. So that program is fundamentally getting arranged in my Chakop office, and the functioning is like this. One person, whoever wants to come, has to select his own topic of law. He has to give a 30 minutes presentation on that particular thing. He has to make dossier for that. He has to make 2 dossiers. One will stay with him, one will remain with Hammurabi. So after 35 minutes his own delivery, there will be a Q&A session between us. Now the basic intention behind this program is, today we have our guests. I want equally our people who come here to become groomed to become a guest. Because today you are sitting here, just assume in the next Saturday you are sitting here and we are asking you. Obviously you will have to have more study, you will study more, you will get more case laws. So that's the intention of this program. First program is done by Rajesh, and he is doing on the topic of injunction. He is going to put his own thoughts on that, his own researches, whatever he has, and we have all the scope to ask him the Q&A for that. So if possible, please do there. I understand the venue is very far, but obviously you will also appreciate that our funds are equally less. So with this, I thank everybody. Thank you. गणमन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा, विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा, तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे, गाहे तव जय गाथा, जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे. Thank you everybody, thank you.